I built our family business. To 200 Miller, then Dad said, "Your brother will be CEO now." I built our family business from the ground up. I was the one who negotiated supplier deals in tiny conference rooms while my father stayed back home to play golf with board members. I was the one who flew red-eye flights for client dinners, smiled through exhaustion, and closed contracts while my brother, Nathan, posted motivational quotes on LinkedIn. And yet, when the company reached a $200 million valuation, my father stood at the center of the executive boardroom and said the words that split something permanent in me. "Your brother will be CEO now." Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. There was no discussion. No vote. Just a press release already drafted and handed out like party favors. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood there while everyone else applauded. And when it was over, I walked to my office, closed the door, and stared at the wall for a full hour. Then I began packing. My father didn't stop me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He only left a printed schedule for the upcoming shareholder event on my desk with a yellow post-it note, "We still need your presence on the panel." That was the last thing he ever needed from me. I didn't go to the panel. I didn't answer the calls. I didn't check the news. I rented a short-term apartment and stayed offline for weeks. Every box labeled urgent was ignored. I didn't know where to begin again, only that I couldn't stay in a world where I had no name, only function. People thought I was resting. Some thought I was having a breakdown. Truth was, I was just remembering how to breathe in a room that wasn't filled with my father's shadow. It wasn't just that he chose Nathan. It was that he never even considered me. After 14 years of building the brand together, me sitting in on every deal, every crisis, I'd been nothing more than a placeholder. The daughter who did the work, while the son inherited the title. I moved into a furnished one-bedroom in Chicago under a different last name. I emptied out my personal savings, the one account Dad didn't control, and gave myself 6 months to decide whether I would start over or vanish entirely. In that first month, I started sleeping. More than 4 hours a night. My eyes stopped twitching. I remembered what silence sounded like without the pressure of shareholder earnings ringing in my ears. My phone kept ringing, of course. Nathan, mostly. A few board members. One executive assistant who I think genuinely cared. I didn't answer. I didn't owe any of them a response. The thing about disappearing is that it forces you to see who follows. No one did. Not even my father. It was my mother who eventually found me. She showed up one Sunday morning with a grocery bag and a nervous smile. She didn't try to make excuses. She didn't cry. She just handed me the bag and said, "There's roast chicken and your favorite soup. I wasn't sure if you were eating." Well, I let her in. She didn't ask questions. She just sat with me while I heated the soup and we talked about nothing. TV shows, a neighbor's loud dog, the rising cost of avocados. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in 10 years. Before she left, she said, "You don't have to forgive him, but I hope you don't let this end you." I didn't reply. I didn't know yet. When I filed to officially step away from the company, I listed health and creative transition as my reason. Nathan issued a statement about my long-standing contributions. I didn't read it, but I heard through someone that he called me the backbone of the early years. No mention of the last 7. I spent 3 months consulting quietly for a startup on the West Coast. They didn't know who I was, not really. Just someone with sharp insights and a track record they couldn't verify but trusted instinctively. They paid on time, respected boundaries, and never called me kiddo like the senior VPs used to do back home. That anonymity gave me clarity. I remembered that I was more than a last name, more than a reliable worker. I was a strategist, a builder. I didn't need their permission to start again, so I did. With the remnants of my private investments, because she deserves to decide what to do with it. The house? Of course. I checked the will later that week. She had left the family house in my name. Everything else, savings, possessions, whatever was left, she had divided between me and Nathan. I didn't contest it. Nathan didn't reach out. I didn't expect him to. I went back to the house once more before making a decision. It wasn't just a building. It was a storage unit of memories I didn't want, birthdays that turned into arguments, holidays where I pretended I wasn't invisible, and too many dinners where I smiled just to avoid tension. I walked room by room, writing notes, taking photos of furniture I didn't want to keep. The only thing I packed was the locket. Inside it was a photo of me as a child and a slip of paper that said, "You were always enough." That night, I called a realtor. I told him I was putting the house on the market. He said, "You sure? It's a legacy property." I said, "Exactly. It sold within a week." I used the proceeds to fund a new branch of our company, not for growth, but for support. An internal fund dedicated to covering medical emergencies, maternity leave, relocation assistance, and unexpected family situations for employees. Jules called it the foundation. I didn't argue. A few weeks after the launch, she asked if I wanted to speak at the internal kickoff. I said no. "Just one sentence," she insisted. So I stood up in front of 40 staff members, most of whom I barely knew yet, and said, "We take care of our own." Then I sat back down. It was the only thing that needed to be said. Months passed. The company kept growing, slowly, consistently, the kind of growth that doesn't collapse under its own weight. I got a card on my birthday. No return address. Inside was a plain note. "You were right to walk away." No signature. I knew it was from my father. I didn't write back. Some things don't need closure. Some endings are just that, endings. One evening, I sat in my new office, looking out at the city. The walls were bare, no framed photos, no plaques. Just a desk, a chair, and a view of what I had built without permission, approval, or inherited titles. Ben knocked on the door. "We're wrapping up the quarter," he said. "Anything you want to say to the team?" I thought for a second, then shook my head. "No," I said. "Just tell them to go home on time." He smiled. "Will do." Before he left, he paused. "We never would have gotten here without you." "You know, I know," I said. He nodded and closed the door behind him. I looked down at the locket sitting in the top drawer of my desk. Still closed. Still intact. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I had already decided what to do with it. The next morning, I mailed it to a woman who had just been promoted in our operations department. Single mother, working 2 jobs when we hired her. No note, just the locket. Let her carry it now. I was done. I recognized my mother's handwriting. I called her that evening. She didn't bring up the letter. Neither did I. We just talked about the weather, the neighbors, her garden. At the end of the call, she said, "I saw your photo in that blog post." "Oh?" "You looked like yourself again." "I am." That makes me glad. I didn't hear from Nathan again. Not directly. But someone forwarded me a video from a small conference he'd spoken at. He looked thinner, paler. His hair was shorter, almost military style. He spoke about the dangers of mismanagement and what happens when legacy blinds leadership. He didn't mention me, but near the end, he said, "Sometimes you build on someone else's work and pretend it's your own. But eventually, the truth surfaces." Then he paused. "Sometimes the person you underestimated turns out to be the one who saves what you destroyed." The crowd clapped. He walked off stage. I closed the video. That night, as I shut down my computer, Jules stopped by my office. "You ever going to let us throw a real launch party?" she asked. I smiled. "You can throw whatever you want. Just don't make me give a speech." She laughed. "Deal." Before she left, she turned back and said, "You know, we were talking earlier. This place has a different energy. People feel safe here. Seen." "That's the point," I said. I turned off the light, walked out, and locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call from the hospital. My mother had passed during the night, peacefully, in her sleep. No warning signs, no final goodbyes. Just a silent ending, the kind she would have preferred. I didn't cry right away. I didn't do anything, actually. I just sat at my desk and listened to the silence in the room. Ben came in to ask about a report and froze when he saw my face. "She's gone," I said. He nodded. "Do you want me to handle things today?" I didn't answer. I stood up, got my bag, and walked out. The funeral was small. My mother didn't want anything grand. She had left instructions in her will. No flowers, no religious speeches, no drawn-out ceremony. Just a simple burial with a plain headstone and a list of names she wanted notified. My father handled the logistics. He called me once to tell me the details. I said, "I'll be there," and hung up. I hadn't seen Nathan in months, not since the dinner. He showed up wearing a black suit and sunglasses. He didn't speak to me. I didn't speak to him. We stood on opposite sides of the same plot, both pretending to be composed. My father spoke briefly. Nothing dramatic, just a few words about her kindness and her strength. When it ended, people started to leave. I stayed back. I waited until everyone was gone, then walked over to the grave alone. There was no eulogy to give, no story left to share, just the reality that she was gone, and I was still here, with all the weight she had carried on her back for years now resting somewhere in me. As I turned to leave, my father was standing behind me. "She left something, for you," he said, holding out a small velvet box. I didn't take it right away. I looked at it, then at him. "It's from her," he said again, a little quieter. I took the box and left. It wasn't until later that night, alone in my apartment, that I opened it. Inside was a key, just one, small, old, worn at the edges. It didn't take me long to figure it out. The next morning, I drove to the old family house. I hadn't been there since the dinner. It was quiet. Dust had settled into the corners. The fridge was empty. The living room was cold. In the upstairs hallway closet, behind a box of holiday decorations, there was a small locked cabinet built into the wall. I had only seen it open once before when I was a teenager. My mother had said it was where she kept the things that matter, the key fit. Inside were only 2 items, a stack of old journals and a small silver locket. I took the journals first. They were hers, years of writing, notes, thoughts, fragments. Most of it was personal, reflections, memories, fears she never said out loud. But near the end, there was a page with my name at the top. They took her for granted, all of them, even me sometimes. But she never stopped. She held this family together while being told she didn't belong in it. I couldn't protect her, but I hope this house becomes hers one day. Not because she wants it. Just a quiet footnote in a trade journal. Final flagship assets absorbed by undisclosed entity. I didn't correct it. There was no ceremony, no ribbon cutting, no handshake, just an internal email to my team that read, "We begin Monday." New structure, new vision, same standards. There were only 7 of us in the room that day. Jules, Ben, 3 recent hires, a legal advisor, and an HR lead I trusted from my consulting years. We sat around a basic conference table in a rented downtown space with no name on the door. I stood. I didn't give a speech. I just outlined the plan. Clear, measurable, no fluff. When I finished, Jules looked at me and said, "So what do we call you now?" I didn't answer right away. Ben said, "CEO, obviously." I shrugged. Sure. It wasn't about the title anymore. I didn't need a plaque. I didn't need LinkedIn to update anything. But that night, as I walked home, I thought about what it meant. All those years being told I was too serious, too cautious, not bold enough. All those meetings where I laid out strategy while Nathan bragged about culture. All those rooms where I was the only one doing the math. Now there was no one left to overrule me. And it didn't feel triumphant. It felt earned. We hit our first milestone 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Second one, 5 days early. Clients didn't just come back, they referred others. A supplier sent us a handwritten note. It's good to be working with people who understand the business again. Internally, we built new systems, clean ones, no bureaucracy, no family politics. When we had a problem, we solved it. If someone wasn't performing, they were coached, then let go if needed. No favorites. The only rule I made public was this. No legacy hires. If your last name had power somewhere else, it didn't matter here. One morning, I opened my inbox to find an interview request. A national outlet wanted to do a feature on women in leadership. They said they admired the way I had rebuilt from nothing. They wanted to know how I overcame being overlooked by male leadership in your family's company. I declined. Didn't want my story told like that. I wasn't some victim of a gender battle. I wasn't interested in turning my life into a message. I just wanted to run my company. But stories have a way of leaking. A former intern, now a writer for a mid-sized blog, published an article titled "The One Who Did the Work." It didn't mention me by name, but it mentioned flagship. It referenced key dates. It told the story from her point of view, back when she watched me build pitch decks until midnight while Nathan left early. It went viral. I didn't ask her to take it down. A week later, we were contacted by a foundation that offered to fund an outreach program for young women starting in logistics and operations. I agreed, but only under one condition. The program would be run independently, and my name wouldn't be attached publicly. I wasn't looking to be the face of anything. Just wanted to keep building. One Friday afternoon, I walked past our old headquarters. The building had been sold. The new tenants were a tech firm. Bright signs, modern font, too much glass. The lobby still had the original marble floor I chose 10 years ago. They didn't know that. No one did. I stood there for a minute, unnoticed. Then I left. That weekend, I was invited to speak at a closed executive roundtable in Boston. 15 people, no press, just discussion. I flew in, gave my perspective, answered questions. No titles, just logic and numbers. After the session ended, a woman in her 50s approached me. "I've followed your work for years," she said. "I remember what happened with Flagship. I've never said this to anyone, but watching you take everything back without ever raising your voice, that changed how I lead my team." I nodded. Didn't know what to say. "It's hard," she added. "When your own family pretends you don't matter?" "Yes," I said. "It is." When I returned to the office Monday, there was a box on my desk, no name on the label. Inside was a leather binder, old, worn, familiar. It was mine, the one I used to carry in the early Flagship days. No note, just the binder, returned. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an old printout, one of my first product lifecycle spreadsheets, the one that got me my first contract. At the bottom, a handwritten message. "You were always the one holding it up. Nathan put down his fork and looked at me. "We need to talk about Flagship." I didn't respond. I just waited. "I know you've been acquiring assets. I know you've taken back most of the core divisions. I know it's legal. But this can't go on like this. We're falling apart." "You're already apart," I said. He looked at my father, who cleared his throat and finally spoke. "We made mistakes. I cut a piece of chicken without looking up. You made decisions. That's different. We thought," my father began, but I interrupted. "No, you didn't think. You decided. You announced Nathan as CEO like it was nothing. You handed him the company while I was still sitting in the room. It wasn't meant to be personal," he said. I looked up. It was never not personal. My mother stayed quiet, eyes down. Nathan jumped in again. "Look, we can work together. Maybe it's not too late to restructure, merge the assets, stabilize the company under a new umbrella. We could present a united front. Our name still has weight." "No," I said, setting my fork down. He stopped. "I'm not interested in working with you. I'm not interested in your front, your name, or your fake unity. I've built something clean. I won't let you back into it." "So you're just going to destroy everything we built?" "I'm saving what I built. You're welcome to destroy whatever's still yours." He laughed, but it didn't sound real. "You always think you're smarter." "I don't think I am," I said. "I know I worked harder. I know I stayed when it was falling apart. And I know I left with nothing, while you were handed everything." My father spoke again. "We can't change the past. I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" he asked. "Nothing." They both looked at me, confused. "I don't want an apology. I don't want recognition. I don't want a seat at your table. I have my own now. The silence after that stretched too long. My mother was the one who finally broke it. She placed her hand over mine and said quietly, "It's okay not to forgive." I looked at her. She was the only one in that room who hadn't tried to sell me something. We finished dinner in silence. No dessert, no toasts. Before I left, my father stood by the door and said, "If you ever want to come home, I am home," I replied. "Just not here." That was the last time I stepped into that house. A week later, the flagship holding group issued a statement announcing the sale of its final assets. The company was effectively dissolved. Nathan blamed the market. The board blamed mismanagement. No one mentioned me, which was fine. I didn't need the credit. I met with Jules and Ben that same afternoon. We were in the middle of moving into a new space downtown. Nothing fancy, but ours. "We've got a list of partners who want in," Jules said. "I'm not interested in partners," I replied. "Not yet." "Then what are you interested in?" Ben asked. "Stability." And that's what we built. In the months that followed, we launched 3 new initiatives under our brand. All of them grew faster than projections. Clients came back. Former employees reached out asking for second chances. Some we hired, others we didn't. There was no bitterness, just business. But there were moments when I still felt something sharp. Twist in my chest, not regret, not sadness, something else, something quieter. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, one of the old company's early days. Me, Nathan, and our father standing in front of our first office. I was holding a folder. Nathan was holding the ribbon-cutting scissors. My father stood between us. On the back of the photo, one sentence written in my father's handwriting. "We should have listened. I didn't frame it. I didn't keep it on display." But I didn't throw it away either. I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk, under old invoices and vendor agreements. It's still there. Sometimes when I look for a file, I see the corner of it. But I never pull it out. I don't need to anymore. Because now people remember my name again. Not because I forced them to, because I earned it back. By the time I signed the documents finalizing the transition, the media had already moved on. Flagship Holding Group was officially dissolved. What remained were fragments, logos, empty office buildings, contracts that expired without renewal. It didn't make the front page. There was no public statement. He said, trying to recover. "Maybe we can meet. Just talk. Things got out of hand, but we can fix this. I can step back. We can restructure. Maybe even..." I hung up. I didn't need to hear more. What came next wasn't explosive. It wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork, signatures, and a long email thread between lawyers. That's what these things really are, not shouting matches or showdowns. Just documents. The last asset I acquired was the operations platform we built in-house 6 years ago. The system Nathan never understood, the one he called too technical to bother learning. It had been leased to a third-party provider. I bought that provider. One by one, the bones of the company I helped build were coming back into my hands. Not because I wanted them, but because I was the only one who could run them without destroying them. The day the internal flagship newsletter reported the sale of its logistics branch, the headline was clinical. Divestment strategy continues. Operations software acquired by external entity. No one said who. But everyone in that building knew, or at least they suspected. Jules called me that night. "You're making people nervous," she said. "Good," I replied. "Even Dad?" she asked. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, until that weekend, he showed up, not at my apartment, not at my office, at my mother's. She called me in the middle of the afternoon. "He's here," she said, her voice low. "He wants to talk." "I don't." "I know," she said. "But maybe you should hear it." I drove over. He was sitting at the kitchen table like he had in every childhood memory. Only this time he looked older, smaller, like someone who had run out of cards to play. "I know what you've been doing," he said. "Then you also know why." He didn't argue. "I made mistakes," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You were always the one who held it together." I didn't say anything. He continued. Your brother. He wasn't ready. I thought he'd grow into it. I thought it would make him stronger. It didn't, I said. He nodded slowly. And now? I'm cleaning up the mess. He didn't ask to be forgiven. Maybe he knew better than to try. I hope you don't forget where you came from, he said. I looked him in the eyes. I didn't forget. That's why I'm still standing. He left after that, and I sat in silence for a long time, unsure if what I felt was satisfaction or just relief. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd stopped waiting for them to fix what they broke. That night, I opened the original binder I used to carry during board meetings, the one filled with reports, projections, and strategies. Tucked in the back was an old draft of our 5-year plan, my handwriting, my vision. I tore it out and started a new one. No partners, no permission, no family name on the front, just a blank page and my initials at the top. It was my mother who insisted on the dinner. She called me 3 times in 1 week, leaving the same message each time. Please come, just dinner, that's all. I didn't want to go. I had nothing to say to either of them, not to my father, and definitely not to Nathan. But my mother sounded tired. She never asked for much, and she'd been the only one who didn't pretend I didn't exist after everything collapsed, so I said yes. I told her I'd be there, but only for 1 hour. She agreed. It was a Sunday. The house looked the same from the outside, the same dark shutters, the same uneven walkway that Nathan never bothered fixing. Inside, it felt like time had been frozen for the sake of performance. The living room smelled like furniture polish. The dining table was set with the good plates, the ones reserved for holidays and business guests. Nathan was already there. Of course he was. He smiled when he saw me. Not the kind of smile that meant, I'm happy you're here, but the one people wear when they want to prove they're still in control. You look well, he said. I am. My father nodded at me from the head of the table. He didn't speak. My mother was still in the kitchen, moving things around even though everything was already prepared. Dinner's ready, she said, walking in with the last bowl of roasted vegetables. We sat. The first few minutes were filled with empty conversation, weather, traffic, some local development project Nathan pretended to care about. Then the real reason for the dinner surfaced. That would imply I still expect something from you. He didn't speak after that. We ended the call. The dinner came and went. I didn't attend, but I saw the photos afterward, online, in business publications. Nathan stood center stage, but the headline was different this time. Missing from this year's dinner, the former co-founder who built the company's foundation. They didn't say my name, but people knew. The next week, a journalist called, said they were doing a retrospective on women entrepreneurs who had been written out of their own companies. I declined the interview. Let the silence speak for itself. It was louder than any quote I could offer. It didn't happen overnight. People think these moments, the turning points, arrive like some kind of lightning strike. They don't. They creep in slowly. They build in quiet spaces, in unread emails, in long silences between phone calls. That's how it started for me. I had no plan for revenge, not at first. I wasn't sitting in a dark room plotting ways to bring them down, but I also wasn't going to pretend I owed them anything. What I had was a working business, steady revenue, and a team I trusted. What I didn't have was closure, and I'd stopped pretending that I needed it. But then something shifted. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just wrapped up a supplier call when Jules sent me an internal memo that had accidentally been forwarded from a contact still inside Flagship Holding. It was a breakdown of their financial standing. Private, not public data. They were bleeding. Revenue was down 28% year over year. Client retention was crashing. The core division, the one I had just quietly bought back, was the only branch, still functioning at near capacity. The rest were sinking. I read the document 3 times. Then I opened a folder I hadn't touched in 2 years. One I'd labeled Fallouts and Opportunities. Inside were notes I had written in the first weeks, after walking away. Names of vendors they'd mistreated, partners they had burned. investors who had quietly stepped back, not because of numbers, but because of Nathan. It wasn't vengeance. It was strategy. That night, I contacted 2 firms that had once begged to be let into our early rounds, but were blocked by my father because they didn't respect family hierarchy. I set a meeting for Friday, told them only what they needed to hear, that the company was vulnerable and I had leverage. They were interested, and they weren't the only ones. By the following week, I had quiet buy-in from 3 separate entities, none of them aware of the others. I wasn't playing them. I just wasn't ready to commit, not yet. Not until I knew what Nathan was doing with the rest of the board. I didn't have to wait long. Another memo arrived, forwarded again by someone who still remembered me, even if they weren't allowed to say it out loud. This one included a proposal Nathan had put together, a desperate attempt to license the company's remaining patents in exchange for temporary cash injections. He was cannibalizing the structure, selling off the future to survive the present, and my father? He signed off on it. That's when I knew. They were too far gone to fix themselves, and no one inside had the authority or vision to pull the brakes. The board was fractured, staff morale was low, clients were walking out quietly. The house was already on fire. All I had to do was own the land it was built on, so I did. Over the course of 3 months, I bought out 3 key vendors. Not the ones they owed money to, the ones they were still barely hanging on to. I offered them better contracts, more transparency, respect. Then I approached 2 more divisions within Flagship, smaller ones, easier to peel off, like weak branches, and I didn't go in loud. I sent in third parties, trusted contacts, lawyers, friends of friends, nothing tied to me directly, until the moment I signed the final purchase agreement for the last of those 2 divisions. That's when the silence cracked. Nathan called again, this time from an unknown number. I picked up without thinking. Is it you? He asked. Depends, I said. Who do you think it is? I know it's you. They told me. I didn't say anything. He kept going. Why are you doing this? I paused. You really don't know? He didn't answer. But I could hear the breath shift on his end, like he'd been punched but didn't want to admit it. Look. The other was Ben, a guy I trained myself when he was fresh out of school. Quiet, numbers-focused, allergic to office politics. Nathan fired him after an internal audit he had nothing to do with. I offered him a role as head of data and gave him full autonomy. He accepted within the hour. Those 2 hires were the beginning of what became a slow, deliberate resurrection. Not a flashy one. No press coverage, no rebrand. We kept the same name, the old one, because I wanted them to feel its weight again. Not the public. Them. The ones who broke it. And they did. The calls started coming in, former employees, partners, investors. Most of them thought it was strange the company hadn't completely folded. They were curious. Some offered to buy in. I refused them all. This wasn't about growing fast. It was about rebuilding right. 3 months in, we had positive cash flow. 6 months, and we were ahead of projections. Not explosive, but stable. Honest growth. Then came the call I had been expecting. Nathan. I recognized the number, but I let it ring. Voicemail. I didn't check it at first. I was in the middle of onboarding 2 hires, but at night I finally listened. His voice wasn't confident. It wasn't loud. It was soft, almost unsure. Hey, I heard you're working again. I'm not sure what you're doing, but things aren't great over here. If there's any way we could talk, maybe figure something out. I think Dad would be open to a conversation. Call me? I didn't. I replayed it once, then deleted it. That was the first time I realized Nathan was scared. Not just a failure, of being irrelevant. My father was next. He didn't call. He sent an email. Short. No subject line. There are things I should have done differently. You know, I only wanted what was best for the company. If you're involved in the acquisition, I'd like to talk. No pressure. Just coffee. You pick the time. I stared at that email for 3 days. Then I archived it. I wasn't angry. I was just done asking to be seen. But what surprised me most was how many former clients reached out, not to gossip or get the inside scoop, but to say things like, "We always knew you were the brain behind it," or "It feels good to see someone competent back in charge." They didn't even know it was me officially, but they suspected, and that was enough. The first time I stepped into the office building again, the one I used to practically live in, I wore a plain gray coat, no makeup, hair tied back. I wasn't there to make a statement. I just wanted to see what was left. The receptionist didn't recognize me. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just passing through." I walked the hallways. The energy was different, tired. Everyone was moving slower. No one was talking much. I found the old marketing room, now used as a half-empty storage area. The mural we once had on the wall was gone. So were the awards. I left without speaking to anyone. That night, I got a message from Jules. "People are starting to figure it out. Word's spreading. You okay with that?" I said yes. Let them know. Let them remember. It wasn't about reclaiming power. It was about reclaiming truth. Because what they did wasn't just removing me from the company. They erased me from the story. Like I had never been there. Like the contracts I secured, the nights I stayed until midnight running logistics, the partnerships I brokered. None of it mattered once Nathan put on a suit and smiled for the cameras. But now, the narrative was cracking. People were remembering. Slowly. I never expected an apology. But I did expect to be left alone. Instead, what I got was an invitation, an actual printed invite, from my father. Flagship Holding Group, Annual Founders Dinner, celebrating 35 years of legacy. The card was embossed. My name was handwritten. Stared at it for 10 minutes before tossing it in a drawer, but I didn't throw it out. 3 days later, I got a message from the venue coordinator. "We received confirmation for your attendance. You'll be seated at the founders table." I hadn't confirmed anything. He had. I called the number listed on the card. My father answered. "I didn't RSVP, I said. "I figured you might change your mind." "I haven't." "You should. Come. Everyone will be there." "That's exactly why I won't." He paused, then asked, "Are you still angry?" "No," I said. I acquired a struggling direct-to-consumer brand that had potential but zero leadership. I hired 2 people, both women I'd mentored years ago who had since been passed over for promotions by Nathan's inner circle. We set up shop in a co-working space. No signage, no press. We launched quietly. First month, break even. Third month, 12% growth. By the end of year 1, we were closing in on $4 million in revenue. All organic, all self-funded. The day our first major partnership went live, I got a voicemail from my father. I don't know how he got the number. His voice was calm, composed. "Congratulations on whatever it is you're doing out there," he said. "I'm hearing your name again." He didn't say he was proud. He didn't say sorry. He ended with, "If you're ready to talk, you know where to find me." I deleted it. The same week, Nathan laid off 40 people. The company I helped build was hemorrhaging cash and collapsing under vanity projects and bad PR. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen Nathan's management style up close. It was always more about optics than results. 2 months later, one of the board members reached out. "We'd like to talk." I didn't respond. Then came the headline, "Flagship Holding Group Exploring Sale of Assets." The house was burning, and they had finally noticed the match was in Nathan's hands. It would have been easy to laugh, to gloat, to call them all back and say, "I told you so," but I didn't. I called my lawyer instead. "Let's talk acquisitions," I said. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I built that house, and I wasn't going to let it crumble just because they handed the keys to the wrong son. When the letter of intent went through for the subsidiary I'd always loved, the one I fought to protect for years, I made sure it was under a holding name they wouldn't recognize. The press would say it was a private equity fund. The paperwork would show clean investment lines. But I would know. The week the sale closed, I drove past the old office. I parked across the street, watching employees walk out with cardboard boxes and that look of disoriented betrayal. I'd worn that look once. Now I wore heels that didn't pinch and a coat I paid for with my own damn money. Inside my bag was a single file folder. It contained the new roadmap, the budget, and the first 3 rehires I planned to make. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't celebrate when the sale went through. There wasn't some grand toast or night out. I just signed the paperwork, confirmed the wire transfers, and went home to wash dishes. People have this idea that reclaiming something that was taken from you brings closure. It doesn't. It brings responsibility. The brand I had quietly acquired, the same one I spent years fighting to keep afloat back when my father was still pretending Nathan had talent, was in ruins. Its staff had been cut to a skeleton. The culture was poisoned. The few who remained didn't trust leadership anymore. And why would they? They watched as loyalty was ignored, and performance meant nothing if your last name wasn't on the door. But they didn't know yet that I was the one who bought it. That part was still quiet. The acquisition was filed under a shell company. No connections to my name, no interviews, just legal silence. It had to be that way. If they knew I was back, they'd either resent it, question it, or worse, report it back to my father. So I kept my distance. I watched from behind layers. I observed every department, every P&L report, every interaction logged between teams. And slowly I began the process of cleaning house, but not in the way Nathan used to, where he'd fire people to make a point. I made calls, private ones, to people I remembered, people who once had fire in them before they got pushed out. Some were skeptical, some were angry, some didn't even answer, but 2 of them did. Jules was one of them, our old lead on strategic partnerships. She'd been passed over for promotion 3 times by Nathan, even though she'd closed our biggest contract in 2018. She was now doing freelance consulting work, barely staying afloat. When I asked if she'd come back and lead the department again, she hesitated. "Who am I working for?" she asked. I paused for a second, then said, "Someone who's done this before and refuses to make the same mistakes." That was enough. She said yes.